Now, in the 1960s, the musical scenes of London and Paris experienced a profound change, from the Beatles and Johnny Hallyday to Bob Marley and Papa Wemba. What changed then was people, thousands of them arriving from the newly independent colonies in Africa and the West Indies. They brought with them fresh musical styles to London and to Paris, helping to transform capitals here into the multicultural cities they are today. Now, this is the subject of a new exhibition at Paris's Immigration Museum, and joining me to discuss the show is the Scientific Curator there, Angéline Escafré-Dublet. Good morning to you. Thanks very much for coming in. First of all, just sketch it out for us. What is this exhibition?
We want to tell the story of how Paris and London actually resemble each other, not that dissimilar that you may think. And how they transformed from ex-empire, capital of empire, to global city of nowadays. And the contribution of immigration was essential to this transformation. What is also similar to Paris and London is that we start the exhibition with 1962, which is the date of the independence of Algeria, but also Jamaica. And both cities experienced an influx of colonial immigration in the 50s, when they were still in the empire, and then it continues in the 60s. And this two community, the Algerians or the Caribbeans, brought with them music input, and that contributed to the transformation of these two cities. So that's a story we're telling, with music, videos, a lot of photographs to put you in the atmosphere of the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s.
And why tell this story now? We are obviously seeing a rise in some anti-immigrant hostility in Britain with Brexit, of course, but also here on the continent. Did that affect the reason to have the exhibition at this time, or was it just a coincidence?
We've always wanted to compare these two cities because of this input of colonial immigration, and we thought there was a lot of interesting things to highlight. When we started the project, the Brexit wasn't voted yet, so we've worked with this new context, and our intention was to show how much this decision is not going to stop the relation and the connection in between these two cities, because there are so many artists have been going back and forth between Paris and London. London is, of course, a big scene for the music in general, but Paris also for the African music has been essential in making well-known this kind of music, welcoming a lot of musicians. So yes, this context is changing, but we think that the links are stronger and they will probably endure.
Yeah, and I wonder then about some of that influence that the music has had, particularly politically, in London and Paris. We sometimes think of Algerian Rai, Algerian music as having a real political spirit. How much influence do you think that's had on musical scenes and perhaps even politics here in France?
We think the contribution of immigration in terms of music is essential to British music as well as French music and world music in general. I think in reggae definitely resonates with political struggle in Jamaica and in London. And this rebel music really had an impact on people in France in the 60s, 70s and 80s. The second generation immigrants from North Africa who marched in the 1980s all through France to protest against racism while listening to Bob Marley in their Walkman. So music has been essential in accompanying their struggle and in fighting against racism. Should be in the 70s with the Rock Against Racism movement in London, but also Rock Against Police in France, and then the whole world scene and African scene in Paris in the 80s. So there's been a lot of connections, and music has been essential in highlighting this connection and putting people together, essentially.
So did it work in the same way? You said it was 1962 that we saw Jamaica become independent and Algeria from France. Did the musical scenes integrate themselves as easily, or was it easier for reggae, perhaps, than it was for Algerian music or other African music?
I think that's the initial view that you may have. But then when you dig into the history of it a little bit more, you realize how much reggae has been the tool has been widespreading in link with the Notting Hill Carnival. And the Notting Hill Carnival in the 70s was a moment of protest. So music has infused the London musical scene also because of this protest power of music. Music is the force of the future, said Fela Kuti. Well, it was clear from this moment in the 70s. So perhaps reggae was easier to integrate in the British musical scene, but it was essentially because reggae was a struggle music. So it's this link with politics that we show in the exhibition. Yeah, at a time when, you know, you may think that immigration is bad news in many respects. We want to show that immigration is good news because it brings a lot of things to both countries.
Yeah, and it is still a struggle, as you say, for immigrants to France and to the United Kingdom. You're an immigration historian. Tell us, in your view, are things getting more difficult for people to try to immigrate to these kinds of countries and to integrate, whether that's musically or in other ways?
I think it's always been difficult to immigrate because it's you know, it's a big decision. You never know if it's going to work. Most people are you know, doing it because they have no other solutions. So I think when you have a historical view on it, you're not surprised. It's just that immigration has become much more politicized and much more put in front in the news, in the media, but also in the politics. That's what makes it difficult, more difficult now to immigrate. It's because it's so politicized and has a very negative view too. I think as historians, specialists, but also artists need to change this narrative and show that it's normal, it's going to happen, it has happened before, it's going to happen again, and it's fine.
Presumably then that is the aim of your exhibition, to show people, whether they're here in France or in the UK, who might be a bit hostile towards immigration, to show that this is something that's been happening for a very long time and that it benefits communities here.
Absolutely. It's a benefit. It's benefit in terms of music, but it's benefit in terms of culture and in economy, of course.
Tell us a little bit more then about the political role that some of this music has had, specifically when it comes to trying to combat racism in the United Kingdom with reggae, and also perhaps here in France, where we know there are institutional racist problems as well.
Yeah, music played an essential role in first putting people together, because when you listen to music, you know, that put people together. People are having fun together. So put people together, then give a voice to their experience, because in the lyrics, but also by giving a voice, just because you're more listened to when you play to music, and then making your point through, having your message across on racism is bad, it's doing a lot of harm to a lot of people. And music was used by punk bands such as The Clash in the 70s and the 80s to demonstrate that there was an interest in being together, because they were friends with the people from the reggae scene, for instance. So you have an interest in being together, and that, you know, music can put people together and keep them together also.
And I believe you have almost a whole year to go and see the exhibition here in Paris.
Until the 5th of January.
Until the 5th of January. All right, well, thank you very much indeed. That was Angéline Escafré-Dublet talking to me this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks to you.